He smelled like copper and panic. Caleb, the Alpha King's feral son, crashed through my door at 3 a.m., bleeding onto my cheap linoleum. He didn't want sex. He just dragged me down to the floor, buried his face in my neck, and passed out. That was the first mistake. The second was his father finding us there the next morning. The king didn't execute me. He shut the door, locked it, and decided I belonged to them both. The suppressants always left a chalky residue on the back of my tongue. They tasted like crushed aspirin and cheap plaster, a daily reminder of my biology. I washed the pill down with lukewarm tap water, staring at the rust stain in my sink. It was Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday. When you work a 12-hour shift cataloging municipal archives in a basement with flickering fluorescent lights, the days blur into a gray, exhausted smear. I was an omega, a fact I treated like a chronic, embarrassing medical condition. I didn't want a pack. I didn't want a mate. I wanted to pay my rent on time and maybe afford decent coffee. Then my front door splintered inward. The sound wasn't a cinematic crash. It was a wet, heavy crunch of cheap pine giving way. I didn't scream. My throat simply seized, breath backing up in my lungs as I stood frozen in the narrow hallway. A shadow filled the doorframe. He was massive, leaning heavily against the splintered jamb, his breath rattling in his chest like a broken engine. The scent hit me a second later, thick and suffocating. Ozone, burnt pine, the sharp metallic tang of fresh blood. It wasn't the intoxicating romantic pheromone haze the trashy cereals always talked about. It felt like a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. It felt like standing too close to a lightning strike. It was Caleb. Everyone in the city knew the Alpha King's heir. You couldn't avoid his face on the news broadcasts, usually leaving some obliterated nightclub or standing in a courtroom looking bored while his father's fixers paid off the damages. He was notoriously unstable, a genetic anomaly, an alpha producing too much testosterone, too many raw pheromones, his brain slowly cooking in its own chemistry. The media called him the wild heir. The city treated him like a natural disaster. You just hoped he didn't touch down in your neighborhood. Yet here he was, bleeding onto my frayed welcome mat. He didn't look like royalty. He looked like a stray dog that had been hit by a car. His leather jacket was torn at the shoulder, dark fabric glistening under the hallway bulb. His eyes were wide, blown out, the pupils swallowing the irises entirely. I should have run to the fire escape. I should have grabbed the kitchen knife. I did neither. My nervous system simply flatlined. Caleb stumbled forward. He didn't lunge. His knees just buckled, and he collapsed toward me. Reflex, stupid evolutionary reflex, made me put my hands out to catch him. The sheer density of him drove me backward. We hit the floor hard. My shoulder slammed into the edge of the radiator, a flare of hot pain shooting down my bicep. I waited for the bite. I waited for the feral tearing of skin, the assault I had been warned about in every middle school biology class. It didn't come. Caleb's massive weight pressed me into the cheap linoleum. His face dropped into the crook of my neck. He inhaled, a ragged, desperate sound, pulling my scent deep into his lungs. I hadn't taken my suppressant for the night yet. My natural scent, damp earth and bitter black tea, was bleeding through the chemical barrier. Quiet, Caleb mumbled against my collarbone. The word was barely formed, a wet vibration against my skin. So quiet. He went entirely limp, dead weight. I lay there, trapped beneath 200 pounds of unconscious bleeding alpha. The radiator hissed beside my ear, a pathetic, sputtering sound. I tried to push him off. I dug the heels of my hands into his chest and shoved. He didn't budge. He just groaned, a low, rumbling vibration that rattled my ribs and wrapped a heavy arm around my waist, pinning me tighter. Panic fluttered in my chest, a trapped bird battering against my ribs. But it was quickly smothered by a profound, suffocating exhaustion. My left arm was already going numb. The linoleum was freezing against my spine. I didn't stroke his hair. I didn't offer soft words of comfort. I stared at a yellow water stain on the ceiling, calculating how many hours of sleep I was going to lose, and hated him. He was a billionaire's rabid son who had turned my hallway into a kennel. Hours passed. The streetlights outside shifted. The smell of his blood began to dry, taking on a rusty, old penny scent. His breathing leveled out, becoming deep and rhythmic. It was the first time in 3 years, the tabloids would later claim, that Caleb had slept for more than 40 minutes. I didn't care. I just wanted my arm back. I fell asleep out of sheer, miserable necessity, trapped under the monster, praying he would be gone by morning. The lock clicked. It wasn't the sound of my splintered door swinging open on broken hinges. It was the sharp, metallic snap of the deadbolt being picked. I woke up with a gasp, my mouth tasting like stale air and copper. Caleb was still draped over me, heavily anchoring me to the floor. The morning light filtering through the grime of my window was gray and unforgiving. 3 figures stepped over the ruined threshold. 2 were built like brick walls, dressed in immaculate dark suits, enforcers. But it was the third man who made the air in the room turn to ice. Alaric, the Alpha King. He didn't look like a king from a storybook. He looked like a corporate executioner. He wore a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. His silver hair was cropped close, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his scent that paralyzed me. It wasn't loud or aggressive like Caleb's. It was cold, absolute zero cold. The smell of frost on crushed stone. It slipped under the door, filled the corners of the room, and made my lungs ache with every shallow breath. It was the scent of a predator that didn't need to chase you, because it knew exactly where you were hiding. Alaric didn't shout. He didn't look at the blood on the floor. He looked down at his son, curled around a nobody omega on a dirty linoleum floor. "He's sleeping," Alaric said. His voice was smooth, a low baritone that vibrated perfectly in the cramped space. It didn't sound relieved. It sounded analytical. "Get him off me," I rasped. My voice cracked. My throat was dry. I sounded pathetic, and I hated it. Alaric's pale eyes shifted to me. They were the color of dirty ice. He took a single step closer, his expensive leather shoes crunching softly on the splinters of my door. He tilted his head, studying me like a mold growing in a petri dish. "What did you give him?" Alaric asked. "Nothing," I croaked. I tried to wiggle my numb arm free, but Caleb grumbled in his sleep and tightened his grip, nearly bruising my ribs. He broke in. He collapsed. "Call a medic, call the police, just get him off," I rasped. My voice was dry. Alaric ignored my demands. He crouched down. Up close, the sheer dominance radiating from him was a physical pressure. It made my eyes water. It made my omega biology scream at me to bare my throat, to submit, to survive. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached, refusing to tilt my head. Alaric reached out. He didn't touch Caleb. He touched me. His bare fingers brushed against my neck, just above where Caleb's face was buried. His skin was unnervingly warm compared to the coldness of his scent. He pressed 2 fingers against my carotid artery, feeling the frantic, messy rabbit kick of my pulse. I flinched, jerking my head away. "Don't touch me," I whispered. A flicker of something, amusement, annoyance, crossed Alaric's features. He withdrew his hand, standing back up in one fluid motion. "He hasn't slept a full night in 34 months, Alaric said, addressing the room rather than me. The neuroinhibitors stopped working a year ago. The sedatives destroy his liver. And yet, here he is, breathing like a child." "I don't care," I said. "I have work at 9. Alaric looked at me again. Really looked at me. It felt like being X-rayed. "You don't work anymore," Alaric said quietly. He gestured to the enforcers. "Bring them both. Do not wake my son. If the Omega struggles, sedate him. But do not damage him. He is currently the most valuable piece of medical equipment we own." "Wait, what?" "No." I didn't even get to finish the sentence. An enforcer was suddenly there, a cold spray hissed against my neck, and the gray light of the room dissolved into absolute black. I woke up in a sensory deprivation chamber, designed by an interior decorator. That was my first thought. There was no noise. No dripping faucet. No sirens from the street below. No hum of a dying refrigerator. Just thick, suffocating silence. I sat up. The bed was massive, the sheets a dark, heavy silk that felt like cool water against my skin. I hated it instantly. It offered no friction, no grounding. The room was vast, an exercise in brutalist architecture. Exposed concrete walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a forest drowning in gray rain, and furniture made of dark wood and brushed steel. It was beautiful. It was a tomb. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. I was wearing my own clothes, wrinkled slacks, and a cheap cotton t-shirt, but they felt foreign in this sterile environment. The heavy oak door opened without a sound. Alaric stepped in. He had changed out of his ruined suit into a simple black cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He looked less like an executioner and more like a warden. The frost and stone scent flooded the room again, pushing all the oxygen out. Alaric walked slowly back toward the bed. And then he breaks into a slump, collapses on a severely unremarkable Omega, and his nervous system finally shuts down. "Why is that?" "I don't know," I snapped, my voice rising. "I don't smell like anything. I take suppressants." "Which I have instructed the medical staff to withhold," Alaric noted smoothly. "You smell like damp soil and bitter tea. It is not sweet. It is not inviting. It is grounding, like dirt over a grave. It anchors him." I shuddered. "I'm not a weighted blanket, I'm a person." "You are whatever I need you to be to keep my son sane," Alaric corrected. He gestured to the adjoining suite. "You will stay here. You will be available to him when the sun sets. You will let him hold you, smell you, and sleep. You will be paid handsomely when he is cured. If you try to run, I will not send enforcers to retrieve you. I will come myself." "Wait, what?" "No." I didn't even get to finish the sentence. An enforcer was suddenly there, a cold spray hissed against my neck, and the gray light of the room dissolved into absolute black. I woke up in a sensory deprivation chamber, designed by an interior decorator. That was my first thought. There was no noise. No dripping faucet. No sirens from the street below. No hum of a dying refrigerator. Just thick, suffocating silence.